For those of you who don't know, this guy on the left here, this is Stu Peters. On the right is Sherry Tenpenny. Today I want to talk about Stu Peters because he's gone down this bizarre rabbit hole that I don't even know how to describe. You know what? I'll just let you listen to this. Just check this out. This is an older clip. I just want to introduce you to the guy if you're unfamiliar. This specific clip is from late January 2022, okay? It's about the pandemic and that the vaccines are doing this and that and blah, blah, blah.
Stated goal is to depopulate the planet, and the ones that are left either make them chronically sick or turn them into transhumanist cyborgs that can be controlled by and manipulated externally.
So she made these claims previously. That's what she was saying. That was the beginning of, like, before the clip started. She's saying, I made these claims earlier.
By 5G, by magnets, by all sorts of things.
We're going to be turned into cyborgs that can be controlled by 5G and by magnets if you get the vaccine. That's what it's going to do. This is the same woman, by the way, that claimed that people were sticking keys to their foreheads after getting vaccinated. Absolute absurdity. You want to show me a real trick? Then do that with some flour on your forehead and on the key. Nobody ever did that one, of course.
Things. Now, I got dragged through the mud by the mainstream media when I said that in May
yeah?
last year in front of the House Committee in Columbus. Well, guess what? It's all true. It's all true.
No, it's not. It never was.
They talk, the whole issue of quantum entanglement and how what these shots do in terms of the frequencies and the electronic frequencies that come inside of your body and
that do what in your body?
Hook you up to the Internet of Things, the quantum entanglement that happens immediately after you're injected.
Oh my God, dude. Absolutely insane. And look at Stu Peters. Dead serious, deadpan face he's got here. He believes it. He knows that she's right here, and that's why he's got her on. That's Stu Peters. Let me show you a little bit more from Stu Peters. I just want to introduce you to him if you've never heard of him before. Quick interjection, this won't take long. If you like what I do, I'd appreciate it if you watch the video to the end. YouTube bases video reach off of watch time, so watching even an extra minute makes the video go further. Liking and subscribing goes a long way too. Finally, it would be awesome if you guys checked out my Patreon. All links are in the description, of course. Okay, back to the video. Let me show you this clip. I'm not sure when this clip is from. Yeah, I think this clip is from early March 2024. By the way, Vincent James, his guest here, he's a Nazi. And it's so absurd, it's funny, okay, at this point. For the record, before we get into this, I'm sorry, because he's a Nazi and I need to address this. I support the Jewish community 100% with every bone in my body. And I also support the Palestinian community 100%. I am on Palestine's side. I think the Israeli government has put a lot of time and effort and money, U.S. taxpayer money, into propagandizing to Jewish people around the world and convincing them that the Israeli government is the representative of the Jewish people and that they're all part of the Israeli government. No, the Israeli government is a rogue, insane government who has lost the plot completely and is committing genocide. In Jews' name. In Jews' names. It's some really messed up stuff, obviously. So, the point is, we're going to talk about anti-Semitism going completely off the rails. And again, it's so ridiculous, it's comical at this point. But before talking about how absolutely insane this anti-Semitism is, I just wanted to make my position clear. I stand with Palestine against Israel. And I stand with Jews against Israel also. The Israeli government is just, they've lost blood. Anyway, all right, let's listen to this Nazi here, Vincent James, be spoken to by Stu Peters.
When the whole country is falling apart, you look to, well, who's leading it? And you have all these unelected Jews, and you're like, oh my God, it's all the Jews. And then I go on Alex Jones, and I'm like, look, this is a big problem, the Jews. And then I start digging.
Okay, I gotta say, I've never had this problem, dude. I've never had this problem. This dude is seeing Jews behind every blade of grass right now.
And then I start digging into it more, and like every conversation that I have, I mean, it could be about food that's bad for you. It could be about what's being sprayed in the skies. It could be about,
chemtrails,
dog food that you feed, and everything is Jews. It's all like everything that's going wrong in every sector of life. It's like the person that's leading it happens to claim to be Jewish.
Oh my God, dude, this is insane. Quick note before we continue, I want to let you know I just wrote a book. If you want to check it out, owenmorgan.com/book. It's a book about my experiences within Jehovah's Witnesses. It's completely understandable if you know nothing about Jehovah's Witnesses. And if you're a Christian, it's a good reference to use for why Jehovah's Witnesses are wrong about their interpretation of the Bible. The last chapter of the book is 100 questions that I have for the governing body. I'm selling the last chapter separately as its own separate guide if you guys want to get that too. So check it out, owenmorgan.com/book. I'd appreciate that. Yes, there are Jews that live in the United States, and they work just like everybody else, and they have religious practices just like everybody else. Doesn't mean there's some big conspiracy. And hey, sometimes Jews like to hang out with each other, just like Christians like to hang out with each other, just like atheists like to hang out with each other. There isn't this big conspiracy that Stu Peters seems to be like fabricating in his head, where Jews are secretly like pulling strings behind the scenes and trying to control everything, control the economy, and blah, 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 blah. This doesn't exist, okay? It's just people in the system doing their jobs, working, doing things, producing movies or talking on radio shows or, working at banks or whatever. I mean, it's just people doing their jobs. Just finish listening to this, and then we're going to talk about it a little bit more in detail.
Leading it happens to claim to be Jewish. And so I like cognitively made the decision, I'm going to try to pull back and not have this tunnel vision. And
there you go. Great. That's a step in the right direction.
So it's like, well, these Catholics, oh, good. The Catholics are finally.
No, that's the problem. Okay, Stu, you don't need to target groups like this. You don't need to zero in on some set group of people and somehow convince yourself that this group is like out to get you or conspiring to blah, 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 whatever. Like, why is he zeroing in on specific groups and making all these wild accusations about them? Okay, so he found some Catholics. Go on.
And so it's like, well, these Catholics, oh, good. The Catholics are finally, behind something.
Oh, God, we found something other than Jews to blame for something.
Fake Catholics are ruining our country with all of this immigration stuff. And guess who's funding the fake Catholics? The Jews.
It's so ridiculous. It is comical at this point. This guy is off the rails. For the record, Jews have been the historical scapegoat in society across the world for generations, for 1,000 years or more, a long time. It all started really coming to a head, obviously, in the 1930s in Germany and 1940s. And it was all spurred and revved up by this document that was produced called The Protocols of the Elders of Zion. I've talked about it a couple of times on my channel. So I'm going to insert just a real quick explanation of what it is right here. It was originally, I think, 27 different protocols. It was just like they were each published in newspapers in Tsarist Russia before World War I. They were like this long. And the claim was that these protocols were found on a dead Jewish soldier, and they were originally from the elders of the Jewish community, and they were the Jewish plan for world domination. That's obviously completely made up. It was not found on a dead Jewish soldier. It was fabricated almost certainly by the Okhrana, which was the predecessor to the KGB. You can find this book on the FBI website because throughout the generations, this book has been reproduced over and over and over again. Hitler mentioned it in his book Mein Kampf. Henry Ford, the guy that invented vehicles, he also made copies of this and mailed them out. He used a printing press to mass produce these. And in the 1970s, there was another person that was printing these out and mailing them to people around the United States. And that's when this copy was mailed in to the FBI and said, hey, somebody is printing these out and sending them out to people if you wanted to look into this. Of course, it's not illegal to own one or print it out or whatever. It's just anti-Jewish propaganda. So what is it exactly? It's anti-Jewish propaganda that dates back thousands of years. Every accusation you'll find against the Jewish community is in this. It's very obviously not written by Jewish people. Let me just show you what I mean. This is Protocol 2. Let me just give this a read, see if any of this sounds familiar to you, okay? We must see to that wars be brought on economic grounds, putting the nations at the mercy of our international agenda, when our international rights of gold will wipe out all national rights. Our employees chosen from the Goyim cattle, Goyim being a derogatory term for non-Jews, kind of like Gentile, except it's like a slur. That's how it's phrased, basically, in this document. Our employees chosen from the Goyim cattle must be of a type that submit to blind and servile obedience to our specialists and advisors who've been trained from childhood to rule the affairs of the world. These are not empty words. Think of the successes we arranged for Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism, etc. To us, the Jews, really, to us, the Jews. Because we didn't know it was Jews before, so they wanted to make sure that we knew that this is Jews that wrote this. So they put that in there. To us, Jews, this is a joke. Seriously, who actually bought this? Who really believed any of this nonsense? Think of the successes we've arranged for Darwinism, Marxism, Nietzscheism, etc. To us, Jews, comma, it is plain what a destructively disintegrating force these directives have had upon the minds of the Goyim cattle, that being Darwinism and Marxism and Nietzscheism. Sounding familiar, right? All this stuff about Marxism, just about every conspiracy theory you can think of has come out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And again, there are somewhere in the range of 27, I think. The belief that Jews drink blood, or adrenochrome, the idea that evil people are coming to take kids and you know, suck their blood out of their arms like they're sticking a straw in a Capri Sun. That came from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. That was originally an anti-Jewish conspiracy theory called blood libel. QAnon's beliefs, pretty much all of them, came out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. QAnon, whether they realize it or not, is a rebranded Nazi death cult. Seriously. They may not even know. Cancel culture came out of this. Fear of Marxism and communism and Darwinism, all of it came out of this. Fascinatingly, a reporter discovered that this set of protocols, this book, basically, 80% of it was plagiarized from a French satire book written in 1854. 80% came out of this French satire book that wasn't even about Jews. So that should give you a little bit of context for what the Protocols of the Elders of Zion is and how evangelicals are rebranding it to be useful to them. Thanks, past me. Anyway, that's the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. And that's what I mean when I say Jews are the scapegoats. They've always been the scapegoats, especially since the 1900s, early 1900s and onward. They've been the scapegoats. Anytime anything goes wrong, people look for somebody to blame. And who do they find? Jews. Because they were to blame before, why aren't they to blame this time too? They weren't to blame before, is the problem. There was no big grand conspiracy taking place to control the world or to, control the economy or the media or the whatever. Like, all of it is fake. It was all fake all along. Come back to reality with the rest of us. Wildly, Stu Peters went off on this whole tangent about Jews controlling this and that and being responsible for all kinds of stuff. So I wanted to listen to a little bit of his insane ranting. Listen to Stu Peters blame Jews for literally everything.
And Weimar, of course, was the birthplace of the transgenderism and gay rights movements that have once again reared their ugly heads to plague Western Christian society, especially America.
And by the way, the Weimar, what he said in the beginning, the Weimar Republic was the government that existed before the Nazi government took power, basically. It existed from after World War I, roughly 1919 to 1933, somewhere in there. And people were generally free. I mean, it was okay. It wasn't terrible in Germany during that time. It could be worse. It wasn't great, but it could have been worse. The people were experimenting and learning and studying and progressing, and society was growing. When people are free to do what they want to do and free to explore their own interests and identities and everything else, you are naturally going to find that some percentage of the population, when you open it up and make it free that way, is left-handed. Left-handed people didn't feel free to come out about that before. So the percentage was about 1 to 2%. Now it's about 12%. About 12% of the world is left-handed, give or take. I'm one of those left-handed people. It's been a while since I looked it up. 10%, I'm sorry. It looks like it's about 10%. And in the same way, some percent of people are going to be gay. Some percent are going to be trans. I mean, that's just how it works. When you open a society up enough that people feel free to explore their own identities and their own interests, to figure out who they are and all that other stuff, you find that those numbers start to level off at a certain point. So the Weimar Republic was the government before Hitler, and people felt a little more free under the Weimar Republic to experiment and learn and do their thing. And somebody, I don't remember who it was, somebody talked about, being trans in the Weimar Republic. And that's what Stu Peters is talking about. I'm sorry. That's what he is complaining about right now. The Weimar Republic not being extreme enough.
Especially America.
All right. So Stu Peters right now is complaining about the fact that people were free to do what they wanted to do. And he's blaming the Weimar Republic for trans people and for gay people, I guess, saying the lefty government that existed before Hitler has corrupted us today. Wow. Okay.
Heads to plague Western Christian society, especially America. All of this was happening with the full blessing of the Weimar government, which was largely controlled by Jews.
I don't know where he got that from, but okay, if there were, I that doesn't even sound true. I seriously doubt it. But even assuming it was true, okay, Jews were in the system. So, do you realize that the neighborhood that I live in is like 52% Jewish? Yeah, there are Jews in this country. Are you kidding me? I mean, there are Jews everywhere. They're all over the place. Actually, they're really not all over the place anymore. Thank you to Hitler for that one, right? This dude is seeing Jews behind every blade of grass, and it's insane.
By Jews. The Jews controlled the German court system.
By the way, I just want to mention Stu Peters is extremely influential and extremely well known, especially in the conservative movement. You may not know him, but if you have a QAnoner relative or somebody that espouses even QAnon adjacent ideas in your family, that crazy uncle, that whatever, they almost certainly know Stu Peters. He is way more influential than me, like way more. And now he's going on this whole thing about Jews. This is just nuts, dude.
The Jews controlled the German court system. Jews controlled the German banking system. The Jewish people had unprecedented overrepresentation in Germany's government, and they ruled the numerous and hyper-violent communist factions that were trying to take over the country.
I mean, is this sounding familiar? I talked about the Protocols of the Elders of Zion earlier. Does this sound familiar to anybody? This is literally exactly what was described in a book from 1902 that was claimed to have been found on a dead Jewish soldier, supposedly. But no other copies found conveniently, right? And no one can see the original. Nobody wants to see the original. We're just going to reprint. That's all. It's just like an insane joke at this point. Like, I haven't looked into whether there were Jewish people involved in government in the Weimar Republic, I have no idea. But honestly, I doubt it. I doubt that there was any degree of representation in the government by Jews in pre-Hitler Germany. I would put money on the fact that this is just the protocols of the elders of Zion playing over and over and over again, as it always has. That piece of propaganda might have done more damage to society than any other piece of propaganda. I don't know. Because it's responsible for QAnon. QAnon is a rebranded Nazi death cult. QAnon is just the protocols of the elders of Zion rebranded. All of the stuff that they talk about in that book, cancel culture, the Great Reset, what was the other thing? The Great Replacement Conspiracy. It all came from protocols of the elders of Zion. I don't know. The most influential piece of propaganda is a tall claim, so maybe not, but it's up there.
Communist factions that were...
Dude, does this guy have a tongue ring? It looks like he has a tongue ring, but I don't think so. I think that's just, oh God, I'd love it if he had a tongue ring. That would just make my day. No, I think that's just a spit bubble in his mouth.
Communist factions that were trying to take over the country, both by force and at the ballot box.
Yeah, the Jews made up most of the country, and they were fighting at the ballot box.
The Jews also ruled the biggest cultural forces of the time, which were often merged with academia, with the medical field, maximum infiltration for maximum effect.
I mean, seriously, is this sounding familiar at all? This is straight from the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. Lance Wallnau, Christian nationalist, explains it here in his breakdown on Flashpoint, early March 2022.
3% of the population, roughly 3 to 4% of the population, are radical leftist elites. 30% of the population are evangelical born-again Christians that are inclined to go towards Pentecostal language. I mean, we're really out there. 30% against 3%, but they...
I mean, that's just nonsense. There's no, like, radical leftist elite class or whatever. It's just people living their lives, doing their thing, or whatever. But the plan that Wallnau has to, quote-unquote, retake the country from the radical elites is the exact plan laid out in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion, which is claimed that the Jews were enacting on Tsarist Russia, actually, originally. That's where the Protocols was from, Tsarist Russia.
Against 3%, but they neutralize the church because they're also in religion. They changed the definition of marriage, so they've taken over family. They've totally taken over academia, so the education institutions are teaching leftist theology or leftist ideology and silencing conservatives. They're controlling government right now. They've taken over legacy media, Hollywood, entertainment, and arts, and now they've got Wall Street.
So the economy, the government, what were some of the other...
Ideology or leftist ideology.
Oh, yeah. College, like education. Those are the mountains, basically. The 7 mountains. This is called the 7 Mountains Mandate. And it is ripped right out of the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It is the plan outlined originally in the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. This is how the Jews were supposedly going to take over Russia secretly. I mean, is any of this sounding familiar right now? This is just the same song sung over and over and over again. Jews are to blame. Jews are to blame. Jews are to blame. They're to blame for everything. They're to blame for transgenderism. They're to blame for homosexuality. They're to blame for leftism. They tried to take over this government and that government, and they eat babies. You think I'm joking with that one? I'm not. That's really an accusation from the book, from Protocols of the Elders of Zion. It's insane. They see him behind every blade of grass. And Stu Peters is just like the latest iteration. He's just the newest recruit to this. This is a long-standing belief that has existed, honestly, for thousands of years, got really bad, in the early 1900s and then came to a head in 1943, 1944 when Hitler was using the death camps. It's all the same ideology. But as Stu Peters would say, if you ask these questions, then you're a conspiracy theorist. That's what he would say. He is, God, dude, he needs to come back to reality for real. This is nuts. When you start seeing boogeymen behind every blade of grass, you need to reevaluate your life.
People had unprecedented overrepresentation in Germany's government, and they ruled the numerous and hyper-violent communist factions that were trying to take over the country, both by force and at the ballot box. The Jews also ruled the biggest cultural forces of the time, which were often merged with academia, with the medical field.
I mean, you're catching this, right? The Jews controlled the biggest cultural, what was it he said? The biggest cultural what of the time?
Ruled the biggest cultural forces of the time.
You're right, the biggest cultural forces of the time. The economy, the government, media, art, so on and so forth. The Seven Mountains, if you will. Sounding familiar? Did this dude read the Protocols of the Elders of Zion or something?
Were often merged with academia, with the medical field. Maximum infiltration for maximum effect. Sound familiar?
Oh, yeah, it does. It sounds exactly like the Protocols of the Elders of Zion. He wants me to say it. It sounds like what's happening today. Apparently, the Jews are doing the same thing today as they were in Germany in 1933, I guess. Wow, dude. This is honestly sad. This is honestly sad. It's sad to know that there really are people out here who are dead set on blaming Jews specifically for every problem that they have in their life. Like, please, guys, get over it. Talk to a therapist and stop blaming other people and other things for your problems and start taking accountability and figure out how to fix it. Yes, there are Jews that work in Hollywood, and there are Jews that work in banks, and there are Jews that work in government, and there are Jews that work in, I don't know, like, go down the list. All seven mountains. Yeah, there are people in those positions that are Jewish. There's no big grand conspiracy to, like, control all of these individual pieces for, like, what's even the goal at the end? Like, why does he think that the Jews want to control the government in the U.S.? And if it failed in Germany and it led to, you know, the Holocaust, and it failed in Tsarist Russia in the early 1900s, why does he think that this would, like, be playing over again? This is absolutely nuts, dude. And you know the saddest part about this? This clip collection that I put together is 16 minutes long, and we're 2.5 minutes in. I sadly, like, he said so much crazy stuff about this that I can't hit it all. Maybe I'll cover this in, like, a dedicated video on my main channel. I'll cover the rest. This is wild, dude.
They would set their crosshairs on something. They would decide on...
They, you hear him using weasel words there? They. Weasel words are words used to refer to some ambiguous, secretive authority that you don't have to specify. Who is they exactly? What do you mean when you say they?
Set their crosshairs on something. They would decide on something that they wanted to completely destroy.
They.
Some sense of normalcy that they wanted to chip away at, and they'd legitimize it through phony academic and medical studies, just like they continue to do right now today. And one of the most disgusting, most revolting figures of the entire Weimar Republic was a man called Magnus Hirschfeld.
Okay, I don't know who this is, but I think that this person was just somebody who was studying people who were trans. That's it, to my knowledge. Let's just look this up real quick out of curiosity. It's a Wikipedia page on him. Of course, Stu would say, oh, you can't trust Wikipedia. It's the... God, it's the, what would he say about Wikipedia? It's the deep state. The Jews control it, right? From 1868 to 1935 is how long he lived. He was a Jewish German physician and sexologist whose citizenship was later revoked by the Nazi government. Hirschfeld was educated in philosophy, philology? Never heard of it. What is this? The study of language in oral and written historical sources. Oh, okay. And medicine. an outspoken advocate for sexual minorities, such as, gay people, trans people, LGBT community. He's an outspoken advocate for LGBT people. Hirschfeld founded the Scientific Humanitarian Committee and World League for Sexual Reform. The World League for Sexual Reform was a league for coordinating policy reforms related to greater openness around sex, apparently. Okay. He based his practice in Berlin, Charlottenburg during the Weimar period. Again, the government that came after World War I and before World War II, 1919 to 1933, roughly. Performance studies and rhetoric professor Dustin Golds characterized the committee as having carried out the first advocacy for homosexual and transgender rights. He is regarded as one of the most influential sexologists of the 20th century. Okay, so he was just in favor of gay and trans rights, then, is all. He was targeted by early fascists and later Nazis for being Jewish and gay. Oh, I didn't know he was gay. Interesting. He was beaten by Volkisch activists in 1920s. Is this brown shirts? Volkisch movement was a German ethnic nationalist movement active from the late 19th century through the dissolution of the German Reich in 1945, with remnants in the Federal Republic of Germany afterward, erected on the idea of blood and so they were just right-wing extremists, basically, like the Proud Boys, kind of. He was beaten by them in 1920, and in 1933, some German word was looted and had its books burned by Nazis. An early private sexology research institute. So his research institute was looted and burned by Nazis. The books were all burned. He was forced into exile in France, where he died in 1935. Wow. How did he die, I wonder? He was in Nice, France. Oh, he was 67. That's still pretty young. Okay, the way Stu Peters is like building up to this dude is like he's a new Dr. Mengele. That dude was absolutely evil. Just evil. There's no better word to fit. But Magnus Hirschfeld? No. He was just like an LGBT advocate. That's it. Oh, he died of a heart attack. Okay, good. Good. That's good news. I mean, I'm sad he died of a heart attack. I'm glad that he didn't die of being, from Nazis. I expected it, honestly. So it sounds like he lived a full life and was open about who he was and advocated for people honestly. Sounds like a good guy to me, okay? What complaints could Stu Peters possibly have about this dude?
Of the entire Weimar Republic was a man called Magnus Hirschfeld. Hirschfeld was a Jewish physician and self-proclaimed sexologist who pioneered transgenderism at his Berlin-based Institute for Sexual Research.
Pioneered transgenderism? I mean, I think he was just open about sexuality. He was an early advocate of people who were trans, though, from my understanding.
Hirschfeld himself was a homosexual. He was the father of transgenderism.
He's not the father of transgender. There have always been trans people around, first of all. I mean, there are different genders in cultures dating back thousands of years. So I don't even know what he's talking about here. But yeah, he was gay himself, and yeah, he studied being trans.
He was the father of transgenderism. He's still hailed as a hero today by many a pervert.
By many a pervert.
He was the first person to perform a male-to-female operation way back in 1931. He castrated a gay guy who later died after a botched attempt to transplant a woman's uterus into his male body and allow him to carry a child.
This dude is just, like, absolutely shameless. I have no idea what he's even talking about, and I seriously doubt what he's saying here. I doubt basically everything that this dude ever says. Ever. I mean, he got Sherry Tenpenny on, of all people, to tell us that, like, there's that word again, right? The weasel word, they were going to try to create, like, digital avatars of us and control us through 5G or whatever.
Said that in May of last year in front of the House Committee in Columbus. Well, guess what? It's all true. It's all true. They talk, the whole issue of quantum entanglement and what these shots do in terms of the frequencies and the electronic frequencies that come inside of your body. And
the point is, nothing on this program is trustworthy. Literally nothing. I'm surprised he wasn't even more harsh on Hirschfeld than that. I thought for sure that he was going to claim that he's another Mengele. He's basically making him out to be a Dr. Mengele. By the way, if you don't know Mengele, he was a Nazi doctor. I believe he was at Auschwitz, the death camp. And, you know, people didn't view Jews as humans at the time. And some people still don't, honestly. Stu Peters is probably one of those people. So Mengele felt free. I mean, I don't think he had a conscience anyway. I don't believe that Mengele was even capable of feeling emotion. I believe he had psychopathy. So he carried out experiments on live, awake, and aware human beings that would never be acceptable to anybody, ever. Mengele was absolutely evil. You think that Hitler was evil? Yeah, Hitler had some pretty insane views and organized this whole effort to exterminate people, but Mengele had a twisted mind. That guy was just messed up. And Stu Peters here is telling us Magnus Hirschfeld is the problem. He says Magnus Hirschfeld ruined society. Not all of that that Hitler did, not all of the that Mengele got up to, but Magnus Hirschfeld, he's the problem. When you look at like the Nazi situation, when you look at like Nazi Germany, 1933 to 45 roughly, and you think to yourself, the real bad guys in there were the gay people. There's a problem. There's something wrong. Get help, Stu. For real. This is just wild. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. I might actually just watch this whole thing beginning to end in a long form video on my main channel. I'm not sure. I try to keep like political stuff on Fireside and religious stuff on my main channel. And then just whatever I want to, like long form content on Unfiltered. But every now and then there's something that deserves attention on main. And I think that this might. So we'll see. Let me know what you think about it in the comments. This dude needs help for real.